China buddy up in Pyongyang. Chinese President Xi Jinping writes a gushing letter to the regime's leader as Kim Jong-un vows to learn from China's experience of economic development. Another chapter in the on, then off, then back on again bromance between US President Donald Trump and North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. This time, Trump thanks Kim for leaving ICBMs out of a military parade marking a key anniversary. Plus, MERS outbreak part 2? Hopefully not, but South Korea confirms its first case of the deadly virus since 2015. The last outbreak in South Korea killed 38 people. So let's begin with that final headline there. South Korea's first confirmed case of Middle East Respiratory Syndrome, or MERS, in 3 years. A 61-year-old man was quarantined over the weekend after testing positive for the deadly virus, which killed almost 40 people in the country in 2015. The Korea Centers for Disease Control and Prevention says as of Sunday, 22 people have been confirmed to have had close contact with the patient, including his wife, airport staff, cabin crew, passengers on the same flight, and medical staff. Some 440 people who were on the same flight as the man will also be monitored by health authorities. The patient, who is now in an isolated section of Seoul National University Hospital, arrived in South Korea last Friday on a flight from the UAE after staying in Kuwait for around 3 weeks. The Korea Centers for Disease Control and Prevention is analysing CCTV footage from Incheon International Airport to identify any other people who may have come in close contact with him. And staying with the MERS case, on Sunday, the country's Prime Minister convened an emergency meeting to look at ways to try and stop this solitary case causing yet another outbreak. Choi Si-young reports.
After a 61-year-old man tested positive for MERS on Saturday upon returning to Seoul from Kuwait, Prime Minister Lee Na-kyun presided over an emergency interministerial meeting on Sunday at the Seoul government complex.
In 2015, we learned that it's better to overreact to an outbreak than to be late in our response. I encourage everyone here to act on that lesson.
At the meeting, the PM called on civil servants to be prepared for any contingencies so that people don't have to worry. He encouraged the officials to keep the public updated about the MERS outbreak online through their ministry's websites. The ministry also urged anyone who has come in contact with the people under quarantine to come forward to help stop the spread of the highly contagious virus. The first MERS patient, identified only as a Seoul resident, had visited a local medical center in Kuwait to get treatment for diarrhea, and then sought additional treatment on Friday at Samsung Medical Center. Suspected of having caught MERS, he was then transferred to Seoul National University Hospital and placed under quarantine after testing positive. 22 others suspected of having come in contact with him are also under quarantine. They will be tested and monitored for the next 2 weeks, the virus' maximum incubation period. The first case of MERS in Korea was confirmed in 2015, and 38 people died before the outbreak was declared over in December of the same year. Choi Si-young, Arirang News.
Now, in other news, North Korea celebrated the 70th anniversary of its founding on Sunday as one of the most important dates in the North's calendar. September 9th is usually when the regime parades its most powerful military assets and highlights its major achievements of the year. But this time, the event was relatively low-key, and there was one glaring omission. Park Hee-jun reports.
The North Korean regime turned 70 on Sunday. It celebrated with balloons, flowers, and another massive military parade in the capital, Pyongyang. Military vehicles and more than 10,000 troops marched across Kim Il-sung Square as leader Kim Jong-un watched along with guests of honor from other countries, including Lee Hyun-soo, the number 3 man in China sent by Chinese leader Xi Jinping. But reporters at the scene say, unlike previous years, there was no display of North Korea's highly prized ballistic missiles. That's a stark contrast to the celebrations marking the 70th anniversary of its military back in February, when the North showcased its Hwasong-14 and 15 ICBMs, which can deliver nuclear weapons to any city in the U.S. mainland.
Yes, I think the message from Pyongyang was clear that it was a sign of restraint, because for some time, for now, the dialogue between the United States and North Korea has remained in stalemate, and Inter-Korean summit is coming up pretty shortly. So I guess on North Korea's part, they want to be mistaken as a sign of provocation if they went ahead with interballistic missiles.
Instead, this year's celebrations focused on the regime's economy. Civilians paraded across the square with floats displaying messages about socialism, and although there was no speech from the North Korean leader himself, the ceremonial head of state, Kim Jong-un, addressed the public with a softer tone, emphasizing the regime's initiatives for economic reform. Experts say that as long as the momentum for dialogue continues, North Korea will hold back on its nuclear ambitions and concentrate more on its economic growth and improving the lives of its people. Park Hee-jun, Arirang News.
US President Donald Trump has applauded North Korea for celebrating the regime's founding anniversary without the customary display of nuclear missiles. In a tweet on Sunday, President Trump said the theme of the celebrations in North Korea was peace and economic development. Trump also cited Fox News, saying experts believe the regime wants to show its commitment to denuclearize, calling the move a big and very positive statement. He also thanked Kim Jong-un in another tweet, adding the two will, quote, prove everyone wrong. A high-ranking Chinese official who traveled to Pyongyang on Sunday to attend the regime's founding anniversary conveyed a personal letter from Chinese President Xi Jinping to North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. Jaein with the details.
Li Zhanshu, chairman of China's National People's Congress, traveled to Pyongyang in place of Chinese President Xi Jinping to attend the 70th anniversary celebrations. China Central Television reports he also delivered a personal letter from President Xi to North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. In the letter, President Xi hailed Kim's focused efforts to develop the economy and improve people's livelihood through his new strategic line. The Chinese leader also reaffirmed Beijing's commitment to reinforcing relations with North Korea, saying he wants to develop them more quickly by implementing the two sides' common understanding. During his meeting with Kim Jong-un, President Xi's special envoy reiterated China's commitment to a nuclear-free Korean peninsula. Li, who's widely seen as President Xi's right-hand man, expressed hope that North Korea and the U.S. will implement their common understanding made in their bilateral summit and keep to the good trend of peace and dialogue. He added that China wants to play a constructive role in resolving Korean Peninsula issues politically with other concerned nations. The North Korean leader is reported to have reciprocated with an expression of appreciation, stressing how the regime is following a strategic line of focusing on economic development, adding the North wants to learn from China's experience of economic development and expand their bilateral relations. Kim also referred to his June summit with U.S. President Donald Trump, noting that he wants Washington to take action in proportion to North Korean efforts taken in accordance with the deal they reached in Singapore. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
Now, for North Korea, Foundation Day is one of its biggest national holidays, both in political terms and the size of these celebrations. Our Kan Hyung-woo looks at how the regime has marked the holiday in years gone by.
North Korea has put on military parades 7 times to celebrate its Foundation Day on September 9. And since Kim Jong-un became leader in 2012, there have been 7 military parades that he has attended. The communist state has typically put more emphasis on the events every 5 years. So from 2014 to last year, the celebrations were relatively quiet without military parades or public rallies. But for its 65th anniversary in 2013, North Korea celebrated with a massive parade, a public rally, and the so-called mass games. Kim Jong-un attended a parade on the North Founding Day in 2013, when many expected to see new missiles and artillery, but no advanced weapons were revealed, unlike how the regime had displayed its ICBMs in another parade earlier that year. North Korea is known for using its parades to send a message to the world, so the absence of new strategic weapons in 2013 meant the display was not viewed by the outside world as a provocation. In the same year, the so-called mass games took place for the last time before this year's revival. The mass games are famous for their enormous scale, up to 100,000 people performing synchronized dances and gymnastics. Tickets for the games were sold through a state-run website, the cheapest seats going for $113 and more than $900 for the best seats. It's still not known, though, exactly why North Korea stopped holding the games and decided to bring them back this year. Kang-young-woo, Arirang News.
President Trump's newly appointed special envoy for North Korea is due in Seoul in the coming hours. Stephen Biegun's first diplomatic trip to South Korea will run through Wednesday. Seoul's foreign ministry said earlier that Biegun will meet on Tuesday morning with South Korea's Foreign Affairs Minister Kang Kyung-hwa and his South Korean counterpart Lee Hoon. The South Korean diplomats will brief him on the latest developments, including the results of the special envoy's trip to Pyongyang last week. The visit comes at a crunch time as South Korea's latest push for the North's denuclearization seems to be gaining traction. Biegun will also be making stops in Beijing and Tokyo before returning to the US. The head of South Korea's National Intelligence Agency is due to meet on Monday with Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe in Tokyo to brief him on his recent visit to North Korea. It's expected Suh Hoon will convey Kim Jong-un's reported willingness to denuclearize and ask for Japan's support in reviving talks between Pyongyang and Washington to that end. Meanwhile, another top South Korean envoy who visited the North, National Security Advisor Jung Eui-yong, returned from Beijing on Sunday. He briefed Chinese officials on the Kim Jong-un meeting and agreed with them to work on arranging a summit between Presidents Moon Jae-in and Xi Jinping later this year. Jung is due to talk about that Beijing meeting and his North Korea trip in a phone call with his US counterpart John Bolton. Now, President Moon Jae-in is meeting with visiting Indonesian President Joko Widodo at the Blue House on this Monday. The leaders are expected to discuss joint efforts in promoting regional cooperation, including President Moon's signature New Southern Policy drive aimed at improving Korea's diplomatic and economic ties with Southeast Asian countries, including Indonesia. President Moon, during his stay in Jakarta last year, said he would try to double the country's trade with the ASEAN trading bloc to some $200 billion by the year 2020. The visiting Indonesian president landed in Seoul on Sunday for a three-day state visit. Korean tech giant Samsung Electronics has been ranked the fourth most valuable brand in the world behind US tech giants Amazon, Apple and Google, and just ahead of Facebook. A report released by a UK-based brand valuation and strategy consultancy called Brand Finance shows Samsung's brand value surged by 57% on year to nearly $78.8 billion. Samsung Electronics is now worth 8 times more than the next highest South Korean brand in the ranking, Hyundai Motor Company, which has an estimated value of around $10 billion. The report attributes Samsung Electronics' success to its strength in overcoming difficult challenges, ranging from problems connected to the exploding Galaxy Note 7 series in 2016 to the jailing of its vice chairman Lee Jae-yong on bribery charges last year. Now, there's an up-and-coming lifestyle trend among young South Koreans. The YOLO, or you only live once trend, is so last year now. The latest fad is more about being content with the small things in life and just following your interests. Our Won Jung-hwan takes a look.
Have you ever heard of swaking, the Korean phrase which translates to small but certain happiness, refers not to the intensity of the happiness you experience, but rather the certainty of a small amount of it. While this new lifestyle choice seems to be one of the leading trends in South Korea, it differs from last year's buzzword YOLO, or you only live once. Unlike YOLO that encourages people to live life regardless of what others may think, such as posting photos of experiences during trips, small but certain happiness would place more value on who you travel with or how you plan the trip. For example, this 36-year-old man who regularly attends a meeting that plans travel says sharing his opinion and tips with others fits the recent trend of seeking happiness.
While Soh Hoon is similar to YOLO in terms of seeking a certain amount of happiness, it differs from YOLO as it provides a more long-term contentment. I'm attending this group as I want to find lasting happiness.
These small meeting platforms are emerging in Korea, especially among people in their 20s and 30s. This 30-year-old woman living in Seoul is into liquor tasting and says she's happiest joining a small group after work to learn about different liquors.
It's a small thing, but I feel happy to learn about liquors that go well with delicious food. I enjoy learning at this meeting because it's not something I attend to make money or anything, but rather to increase happiness in my life.
On the flip side, some experts say this renewed focus on small things comes from the fatigue young Koreans feel trying to chase big salaries and success.
There are lots of things employees should give up in their life. That is why there has been a lot of interest regarding happiness that can be attained without investing a lot of money or time. And that growing interest, especially among young employees, is shown by these after-work group meetings.
With the new 52-hour workweek system implemented this year, the desire to seek a better quality of life will grow stronger in Korean society. Although it will take some time to be fully embraced, Koreans will eventually adapt and move past excessive competition or comparison with others and seek their own happiness. 원정환, 아리랑 뉴스.
More revelations are coming out from journalist Bob Woodward's new book on US President Donald Trump before its official release. Bloomberg has a copy now and says President Trump made a decision in August of last year to pull the US out of the World Trade Organization, NAFTA, and its trade deal with South Korea. For more on this and other news from around the world, let's turn to our Noah Adam. So Adam, if Trump had gotten his way, this would have really rocked the global economy.
That's right, Mark. And according to the book, top White House officials rushed to stop the president from going ahead with those plans. Bloomberg cites the book as saying the economic advisor at the time, Gary Cohn, and Staff Secretary Rob Porter pulled Chief of Staff John Kelly into the Oval Office to convince Trump to back down. After that, then Secretary of State Rex Tillerson and Defense Secretary James Mattis got involved and painted a dire picture of the national security and economic consequences of such a move. They managed to convince President Trump of backing down from his decision, but unfortunately it did not last long. In early September last year, he was reported to have a draft letter giving the required 180-day notice to pull out of the KORUS FTA. Woodward suggests the letter was likely drafted by White House advisor Peter Navarro or Commerce Secretary Wilbur Ross, who frequently clashed with Cohn and Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin over trade policy. Again, several top aides stepped in, with Mnuchin apparently saying pulling out of the KORUS FTA would jeopardize Trump's efforts to pass massive tax cuts by upsetting free trade Republicans in Congress. President Trump was said to have agreed to hold off, but only until the tax legislation was passed. Woodward's book describes similar scenarios for Trump's decision to pull out of NAFTA and the WTO, with his top aides painting a grim picture of the economic and security consequences that would follow. The Trump administration is facing an in-house loyalty crisis, as Woodward's book and an op-ed in the New York Times by an unnamed senior official suggests there is a movement inside the West Wing to thwart the president's agenda. Many of those officials cited in the book have now since left the White House, with few left to discourage President Trump's eagerness to pull out of international trade deals. Tennis star Serena Williams has been fined $17,000 for 3 code violations during her loss to Naomi Osaka in the US Open final. She was fined for verbal abuse towards the umpire, warning for coaching violation, and smashing her racket. During Saturday's match, umpire Carlos Ramos warned Williams for illegal coaching after her coach appeared to be sending her apparent hand signals. Williams denied the accusation and demanded an apology from the umpire. The 23-time Grand Slam champ then lost a point for smashing her racket, and she eventually lost her cool and called Ramos a thief and even suggested sexism. She also defended her outburst after the match.
I can't sit here and say I wouldn't say he's a thief because I thought he took a game from me, but I've seen other men call other umpires several things, and I'm here fighting for women's rights and for women's equality and for all kinds of stuff. And for me to say thief and for him to take a game, it made me feel like it was a sexist remark. I mean,
despite the controversies surrounding the final, Osaka's victory marked an impressive milestone. She became the first Japanese player ever to win a Grand Slam title. Russia's local elections have been tainted by violent demonstrations against President Vladimir Putin's pension reform. Most of Sunday's protests were organised by opposition leader and most outspoken Putin critic Alexei Navalny. Despite the widespread anger over Moscow's plan to raise the retirement age, pro-Kremlin candidates were on track for landslide victories. Oscar-winning director Alfonso Cuarón's drama film Roma has won the top Golden Lion Prize at the 75th Venice Film Festival. It marks the first movie from Netflix to take such an honour at a major festival and raises the streaming service's reputation as a major platform for art house cinema. Roma is named after the neighbourhood in Mexico City where Cuarón grew up and is a black and white drama based on the director's childhood.
Good morning. I hope you took some warmer clothes over the weekend. The mornings and evenings have gotten much cooler. And many regions will have temperature gaps of over 10 degrees Celsius today. And UV rays will be high in many regions. In fact, Gwangju, Ulsan, and Busan will have very high UV levels in the afternoon, so be sure to wear a good amount of sunblock. Warm daily highs are in the forecast for Seoul and Gwangju, getting up to 28 degrees Celsius this afternoon. Gyeongju will be breezier at 24 degrees. Now, wide gaps in the temperatures will persist for the time being, so be sure to dress accordingly. While showers are in the forecast on Friday into Saturday morning here in the capital. With that, let's take a look at the international weather for viewers around the world. So South Korea will enjoy clear skies with warm daily highs today. Most parts of North Korea will see sunny and mild weather conditions as well. Japan will have a mix of clouds and rain and expect to see wet conditions into Tuesday morning. Sydney will see roller coaster temperatures this week, so be sure to dress accordingly. Strengthening Hurricane Florence takes aim at the southeast United States. And forecasters are urging residents from South Carolina to the mid-Atlantic coast to prepare for it. As for South America, Buenos Aires will have a rainy start to the work week. And after a hot summer for much of Western Europe and parts of the British Isles, the warm weather will keep on rolling into autumn. A fine day is expected across South Africa on Monday. And that's the weather update for now.
Well, with that, that's where we're going to leave it. Stay tuned to Arirang TV. And as I like to remind you, our next newscast is coming up at noon Korea time in around an hour and a half from now. That will be with our very own Lee Ji-yoon. So until then, goodbye.